Welcome back to Detour to Neverland. Today is episode number 230. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're continuing our One Little Spark series. We're going to be discussing how to invoke fear, but a healthy fear, through Disney. So let's get into it. So welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, this is episode number 230, and we decided that this week in our One Little Spark series, where our goal here is to talk about what are the different emotions that we can try to invoke through Disney. And in the past couple of weeks, we've done determination, peace, and joy. We thought we'd take a little bit of a different route. It is right after Halloween, so we thought we'd talk about fear, but a healthy fear. There's a lot of unhealthy fear going around all the time, but healthy fear, and how can we pull that out, and what does that mean to us?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and I wasn't really sure what Brendan meant by fear at first, but I think even when looking back at our storytelling series, when we talked about Snow White's Scary Adventures, fear was a specific emotion that Walt was trying to kind of harness in that ride. He wanted people to feel some of those same emotions that, the movie characters felt. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at today when we think about fear. Or, it's okay to be a little bit scared. Sometimes it's okay and it's a little fun to be scared. But like Brendan said, like a healthy fear, as in, like, we know everything's going to be okay in the end because it's Disney.
So before we get into the meat of the episode, we do want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by our brand new YouTube channel. We've just launched it. If you're here on YouTube with us, thank you. I hope you are already subscribed. Ring that bell down below to get notifications every time we upload a new video, at least 2 every week. Click that bell to get notifications. If you're listening to us on a podcast platform, great. We're going to continue always creating podcasts, but just the YouTube is a little bit of an extra element if you're looking for that visual aspect as well, especially on these storytelling series episodes that we do on Wednesday. We're trying to put up graphics that accompany the topic that we're talking about. So if you're not already, you can search for us, Detour to Neverland on YouTube. We'd love to have you over there. So back to fear. When I was researching this and thinking about how we could have this discussion, I found a pretty cool acronym for fear. And it's kind of the basis for how I built all of this. And it is false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. And to me, that just really hit home about what fear is, about that it's a lot of times a made up thing that you do in your mind. I mean, that's pretty much what it always is for me, especially when we're talking about, fear with Disney. A lot of times it's manufactured. There's other types of fear out there that or maybe not of the false narrative. But for the sake of our discussion today, I think false is a pretty unique way to think about it. What do you think?
I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, it definitely makes sense with Disney because everything is very thought through. And whenever you do feel fear in the parks, I mean, I do think it's intentional. So we are kind of playing with that, I guess, for the park standpoint. And the same kind of thing with movies. I mean, if you think about movies, and we'll probably hit on this later, I mean, there's always some element of fear, or there wouldn't really be anything to carry, like your main character along. They need something there to push them.
And along those same lines, I also saw what is a healthy fear cycle. And so what it says is there's a stimulus. So something has happened that has invoked this fear. Then there's your fear response. Your flight or fight mode is activated. Then the danger is averted or avoided through flight or fight. The learning and reinforcement to avoid similar dangers in the future. I think that's the big thing that we need to focus on, about how can you avoid similar situations, and how can you use this fear to equip you for something better in the future. And then that's the cycle.
Okay. I like it. Those are all good notes.
You do like it?
I think, yeah. I mean, it'll help us roll through, I think, what we're going to talk about.
So, I mean, and just kind of my last thoughts before we get rolling, because, probably when you clicked on this episode, fear is a weird thing to talk about. A lot of times you don't want to try to invoke fear, but I think fear can be such a valuable learning tool. I think that whenever you overcome fear and you get through it, then there's a lot of, it grounds you in reality almost. And there's a sense of prioritization that happens mentally as well. So I don't know. Do you have anything else?
I mean, it's also like a sense of accomplishment in a way. And I was going to get to this later, but I think it goes with different types of fear. So I think as we look at this more and as we get into some of our examples, maybe it'll make more sense, or it'll help us kind of work through some of those different emotions that go along with fear. And then kind of like you said, how you overcome it.
So we have 3 different categories of how we're looking at this with Disney. Number 1 is in the parks. Number 2 is at home. And number 3 is previously the category that we were calling in the car. We've since learned that, a lot of people listen to music at home or their commute's not very long, like Catherine. And so our friend Katie had the great idea. We're going to call it on the go now. And I think that's a much better way. So then it could be like a running playlist, exercise, whatever it might be. But let's get it started with in the parks. There's quite a few obvious ones that I want to discuss them, but I'm curious if they're on Tower of Terror, Haunted Mansion, and Everest. Were those 3 all on your list?
No. So, okay. I guess since we're going to talk about those 3 first, I did talk about the anticipation that kind of plays into fear. So for me, I did mention the anticipation of the drop for Tower of Terror and for Splash Mountain, just because it's that kind of, it kind of goes with thrill, thrill and fear. I feel like go hand in hand because it's like a good fear, like you're excited for what's going to happen because it's going to be fun. It is Disney, but there's still that, if you don't like drops, that could be an issue. And then, just the what's it going to be like, if you've never done it before, especially with Tower of Terror, they have like the different drop sequences. So you never know which one you're going to get. So I think just that anticipation can sometimes be labeled, or it could fit into fear.
So I will never not be scared getting on Tower of Terror. No matter how many times we've been on it, every single time we go through the queue and you listen to the music and the bellhop puts you into your spot, it's always going to bring apart anxiety and fear.
Yeah.
I think is the second part of it. And to me, I think that's the biggest payoff for Tower of Terror specifically as well, is that you feel this sense that things are going to go wrong, that you're not going to survive this. And it is such a feeling of relief. And I mean, you're just kind of flooded with peace once you finish. I think that once the adrenaline wears off, you almost feel like you can conquer anything after you've been on Tower of Terror.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was thinking with Splash Mountain too, because I feel like particularly with that ride, they do a good job of setting you up throughout the entire ride to think that the drop is coming before it does. And then, as you are reaching the top of the mountain, you see the vultures and they're kind of taunting you and it's going to come finally. And then, like you said, at the end, there's that celebration, Brer Rabbit made it out. He's fine. He found his laughing place. And it is just kind of that, that calm or that celebration after the storm that is exciting. And it makes the fear worth it.
Just as an aside, do you think they can capture as much of that fear element when they do Princess and the Frog?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think it has to include Dr. Facilier, or do you think just the way that the track is laid out that it lends itself to fear as well?
I think both, but I almost think that Dr. Facilier is scarier than like Brer Fox and Brer Bear. So I think it could potentially lend itself more to fear.
Well, the music definitely plays a big role as well. You've got all of these animals telling you that you need to turn back in Splash Mountain. So there's certainly they could do something similar with Princess and the Frog. But I mean, if the Shadow Man is there, I almost love him too much. Like,
I mean, we love to fear him.
Well, fair.
He's scary.
Parks things do you have if they're not those big fear invoking attractions?
So to me, this one was the easiest category. And I think it's because Disney does do such a good job of kind of invoking that fear. I did have to mention Snow White's Scary Adventures, because to me, that was the obvious one. I felt like after talking about it and like thinking about it, looking at those ride POVs, like it is a terrifying ride. And, you know, the way that they change their perspective and they want you to feel like Snow White and confused and you don't know which way you're going. I thought that one obviously screamed fear. You didn't have that one?
I didn't have that one. And I guess my mind was just kind of focused on Walt Disney World. So it never even crossed my mind.
Okay. So then the other one I had from Disneyland is our super fun Pixar Pal Around.
Okay. That is not healthy fear.
But I had to mention it.
I don't think that fits into this category whatsoever.
I mean, you know that you're not actually going to die and you will get off and get a snack.
Debatable. I was convinced we were dying.
But we did get snacks at the end. So who's the real winner?
I don't know. I don't know. I think that that's almost like a child screaming on an attraction because they legitimately think their life is over. That's how I felt on the Pixar Pal Around. However, on Tower of Terror and Splash Mountain and to a certain extent Haunted Mansion, I feel like it's a healthy, it's fear accompanied with adrenaline and almost an assurance that you're going to be okay. You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
Because someone could argue the same thing though for the Pixar Pal Around. If they were not quite as petrified as we were, you know, especially for the swinging ones. I mean, I can't even imagine that. But it is like an adrenaline filled, interesting type of thrill. You know, that you probably, I mean, you don't really get anywhere else. There's no other attraction like it. I feel like you have to throw it into here.
That's fair. Do you have any other park stuff?
I do have one more. And I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say about this, but I put Rise of the Resistance on there.
I think that's fair. I don't know if I want to talk about it too much just because we're still in spoiler mode. Maybe for anybody who doesn't want, if you haven't been on it, maybe you skip a minute ahead.
I'll just say one thing about it. So skip ahead. Just when you are captured by the First Order, I mean, that is that anticipation, what's going to happen, where are we going type of fear that, you know, definitely falls into this category. So I felt like it was worth a mention.
Do you think the interrogation room is the scariest part?
No.
You think it's...
I think it's when they first capture your escape pod. Is that what it is? Or the first ship,
I think. The transport droid.
Yes. I think that's the scariest part, when they board your ship.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay.
We can talk about it. I mean, I will have to talk about it because I do think it fits this category, but I don't think it's safe to talk about Rise of the Resistance yet.
So just know that it has some fear in it.
So other park things, you're probably going to shoot me a dirty look for saying this.
Uh-oh.
Universal does an excellent job at capturing fear and harnessing fear and invoking fear in a healthy way. And I don't think it's just because there's more thrill rides there. So I think that's a cop out. However, I do think just from a storytelling and the experience themselves, they pull on fear quite a bit more than Disney does.
Do you think it has something to do with the source material? Like, do you think that has any part of it?
Yeah, I mean, because there's no doubt that Jurassic Park 1, 2, and 3 and Jurassic World however many there are, 2, right?
I don't know.
They're scarier source material. Harry Potter can probably be thrown in that same category as well. Then Harry Potter is fairly fearful too. But I also think it's just the way that they go about things. Like I'm even thinking about the Spider-Man ride. Does a really great job of pulling out fear. And Spider-Man is a very friendly comic book character. I mean, he's your friendly
neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah. And I just think that's not the best example at Universal. I think the best examples are things like the Mummy. And it's not even the attraction. It's not the ride vehicle or the track that you're going on. It's the extra, I almost want to say comic relief that they put in there, but it's the extra little, the extra little pieces of dialogue that they put in there that add to the fear.
Yeah, because that was terrifying. I don't think I can ever ride that again.
You don't think that one was healthy?
No. Yeah, talk about unhealthy fear. That was frightful.
But I also think that Forbidden Journey, the ride in Hogwarts, does an excellent job of pulling out fear. And then I also thought about, I mean, Halloween Horror Nights is a cop-out almost, obviously, because that's
horror, yeah.
Horror and fear are not necessarily the same thing, but to a certain extent they are.
The sole purpose of going to an event like that is to be scared.
Yeah, but is it a healthy fear? I guess depending on the person. Not for us. Anything else that you have in the parks?
No, I mean, I like your Universal thoughts because I never thought about anything in Universal. I was just thinking strictly Disney. But I do think Universal does a good job. And again, it could also be viewed as like adventurous kind of because you have, you're faced with some sort of challenge or an obstacle if you're thinking about like the Harry Potter rides and you're overcoming that. And it is scary, like some of the different things that you encounter or the characters that you interact with and things like that. The Mummy's on a whole other level. But I think that was a good point.
So if you had to describe, because I want to make this actionable, I guess, or just kind of an introspective, whenever you experience fear in the parks, and I think it's interesting, neither of us mentioned any areas, it's all attractions. Whenever you experience fear on an attraction, how do you respond to that? Or what are the following emotions or the following lessons? I mean, we talked about it at the beginning, that it grounds us and helps us appreciate the value in what non-fear feels like. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on kind of what's the next step after you overcome something fearful?
I think doing it again. I think the scariest part about most of these rides that we've talked about is doing it the first time and not knowing what to expect, honestly. And I think like for kids, that's what you see a lot of times too. They don't want to ride the roller coaster because it looks terrifying. And then once they get off it, it's awesome. And I think in looking at some of these rides, it's, being afraid and then recognizing that it was kind of fun and then wanting to do it again to see what it's going to be like the next time. And then I think once you start to get past that fear, you get to experience more parts of that ride. Right? Because if you're super scared the first time you ride the Pixar Pal Round, then maybe you're not actually looking at the scenery or something like that. And then maybe, next time you ride it, you can appreciate, the beauty that is being able to look at some of those things in Disneyland.
It reminds me of a story which we've shared before on the podcast about when your former, what would you say? Foster brother.
Yeah.
Former is the correct word, right? Mm-hmm. He's moved on to his permanent family now. Mm-hmm. So I went to Animal Kingdom with him by myself. Y'all were doing something else. And I went into Animal Kingdom by myself. He'd never been to a theme park before, especially of that caliber. And he was talking a big game beforehand that he was ready to do everything that Disney had to offer. So I said, all right, let's put that to the test. Took him on the Expedition Everest. He screamed like a newborn baby.
Bloody murder.
Screamed bloody murder the entire time. It was not a healthy fear. That was not healthy for him at all. That was a scarring fear. But on the flip side, I think it was because when we got off, I'll never forget what he told me as we were walking away. He said, I was so scared, but I want to do that every day forever. And it's like he, as a 9-year-old, even saw the value in and how much better of a mental space it puts you in when you overcome something that you're so fearful of. That he legitimately, I don't know if he enjoyed the ride while we were on it or not, but just walking out of the gift shop, he felt like he had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Mount Everest, you mean?
Mount Everest, whatever it is.
But yeah, I mean, I think you see that with a lot of kids, oh God, what ride were we just on this weekend?
Big Thunder Mountain.
Yes. And the sweet girl behind us was screaming like that the whole time. But it was the same thing. She got off and she told her parents that she loved it. And, it is that you feel like you accomplished something on vacation without really accomplishing anything. But I think that's what Disney wants you to feel is that, that high of you did it. Congratulations. Go do it again.
Are you ready to move to At Home?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I have a couple of movies. I couldn't really think of any TV shows, to be honest. And maybe you have some as to add to this. But the first one's kind of obvious, very appropriate for the season that we're in. Nightmare Before Christmas. I think that movie does such a wonderful job of making fearful things very approachable. So you see werewolves, you see a Pumpkin King, you see all of these different characters, and you see that they have emotions and they are deeper than they appear. And I know I've lost a lot of people. It's a very polarizing movie. I've seen a lot of hate on it recently online. I still love it. And I think one of the main reasons why is because it taught me how to like Halloween. Growing up, I hated Halloween. And I wanted to get through it as quickly as possible to get to Christmas and Thanksgiving. But I think movies like that make fear more approachable.
Well, and that movie's so interesting because I feel like the whole purpose of that movie is, some things are misunderstood. All the songs talk about how they're not bad characters. They're just scary because they look scary, but they're not doing anything wrong. They're just Halloween characters. So I'd say that that's a good movie as far as one that completely encompasses maybe playing on fear. Because I think it also fits with some of the things you said at the beginning of the episode where, you might be scared at first, but if you have maybe an open mind about it, you can kind of find some of those hidden meanings about it. That was a movie for me that I had written off completely. Just, as a kid, never watched it. I mean, it took a few years for me to watch it with you just because I was like, no, I'm not going to like it. That's not my kind of movie.
The only reason you eventually watched it with me is because we were going to Not So Scary one year. Or no, we were going to Mickey's Halloween party in Disneyland. And we knew that the fireworks were Nightmare Before Christmas themed. And you wanted to get all of the references.
And the Haunted Mansion Holiday. Right. I wanted to understand what was going on. So I'd still say it's not my favorite movie and it's still not my type of movie, but I can appreciate the message behind it a little bit more. But it is scary. There is a fear element to it, especially if you're Santa Claus with Oogie Boogie.
What's next on your list?
So for mine, I couldn't pinpoint scary movies because Disney doesn't do scary movies, quote unquote. So I picked two particular scenes from movies that were fearful to me. Okay. And again, we'll talk about your healthy fear because you're probably going to say these are not healthy because these would be terrifying. But the first one that came to mind when we first started talking about fear was in The Lion King when Simba is told to run away, never return. because then I go to my head and I'm thinking, okay, well, where would I go? What would I do? I don't know. I'm lost and clueless and alone. And that to me screams fear, is being all by myself.
I mean, I guess, I do think it invokes fear. I think the question is that healthy or not? But I think it probably challenges you to think about things that you wouldn't think about otherwise. Now, you're never going to have to be outcast or be alone. So, that's a false reality.
Yeah.
That you've created in that scenario. But if you use it correctly, I think it's healthy.
Well, and if you look at the movie, it's the finding who you are and the overcoming it to, find your place and find your purpose. So it does, you can bring it all back together, but that particular scene to me is very scary. Plus, I think Scar is very scary.
What's your other one?
My other one goes with that. So from Zootopia, and this one, you might think it's a stretch, but to me, so when Judy Hopps, she has this dream. She's going to be a police officer. She wants to go to, it's called Zootopia, the main city.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it's called Zootopia, but I think everybody knows what you're talking about.
Okay. She wants to go to the city and nobody believes she can do it. Her first day at work is terrible. And she's basically starting something new and she doesn't know how it's going to turn out. So to me, that's like a very real world application of fear. It's just trying something new and not necessarily knowing the outcome, but trying it anyway, because that's what you want to do.
I can see that one. I never would have thought about Zootopia whatsoever. And I am shocked that you didn't steal one off my list.
Ooh, what's on your list?
Monsters, Inc.
So disappointed.
That is like everything about making a healthy fear. About how even these terrible monsters that you see are so much more approachable, and they're not what they seem. That if you take a moment to dig deeper, that you can understand that they're not as scary as they seem.
That's a really good one. I'm really sad that I didn't even think of that.
My other two that I had for movies at home, Alice in Wonderland, more of kind of like a weird fear, but Alice is fearless. She's not deterred by anything that she sees, and she sees some ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
So I think Alice does a good job of, we're talking about invoking fear. She's fearless. It's not necessarily the exact same thing, but I do think there's a healthy discussion there of how she approaches fearful situations.
But is that healthy though? Because I feel like in the whole movie, like she feels or she knows like she's dreaming. Like I almost have to feel like in the movie, she doesn't think it's real. And that's why she's not scared of it, because like, why be scared if it's a dream kind of thing?
But don't you just love those people that you meet in life who are just like not a care in the world? They're so oblivious to anything negative. I think there's a healthy middle ground. But that's how I kind of think about Alice, is that she doesn't even recognize that there are bad things going on around her, that she is so committed to, I guess, happiness, finding weird things, that she overlooks a lot of things. So I don't know. That one's up for debate.
Okay.
I feel like. And my last one was Peter Pan.
Oh.
Just because I think that we learn a lot about how children approach fear. Just like I told the story about Jay overcoming Expedition Everest. Mm-hmm. I think that children do such a great job of, most of the times, approaching fear. As a teacher, you may say something different.
As a teacher, I thought about quite a few students who are just happy-go-lucky, not a care in the world. That's where I feel like I see most of my kids. But that's an interesting approach to looking at it. I would have never pegged Peter Pan.
On the go, I think, was the hardest category this week.
Yes.
I really struggled. And I scraped the bottom of the barrel. And honestly, pretty much the only thing I could come up with how to invoke fear through Disney on the go were like the music loops for the attractions that we already mentioned. So I think the Tower of Terror music loop, the Haunted Mansion. Well, you say Haunted Mansion loop, but it's just Grim Grinning Ghosts. The whole time.
In different tempos.
So Grim Grinning Ghosts would fit that. And then I also think, I hate to say it because I don't know if people would listen to it year round, but the Not So Scary playlist has a lot of healthy, fearful aspects to it.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I could really add to that, because I did think of Halloween music, of course, just 'tis the season. But I also thought of like villain specific music that always kind of invokes that fear. So like the Are You Ready for Dr. Facilier, Be Prepared for Scar, Poor Unfortunate Souls with Ursula. I think if you listen to the lyrics of those songs, they're just kind of creepy enough or scary enough to maybe give you those feelings. But again, it's hard to invoke fear. And I don't really know if you want to invoke fear while you're driving. That's probably not a good thing to do. But I mean, I think that's really all you can do, right?
Yeah. And I also have something to look forward to in the future that I'm super excited about. I think if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I was excited for this, I would have said, heck no. But now I am, because at least I enjoy kind of like a horror movie more to a certain extent. We're still chickens when it comes to that kind of stuff. But the Doctor Strange movie, The Multiverse of Madness, is going to be the first Marvel horror film. And I think it's going to be exactly what we're talking about, a healthy dose of fear so that you appreciate what's on the other side. And they will learn through the scary things that they go through and develop the Marvel MCU story so much further. I think horror will be a great tool to push the story further is, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you're going to have to scope that one out without me.
You're saying I'm going to have to go to the theaters, watch it by myself, and tell you if you can go?
Probably.
And then you probably still won't even trust me.
No, I might have to get outside opinions on that one.
So horror, I mean, it's not our category at all.
No.
For anything that we watch. But I think the people who do like that genre maybe subconsciously are thinking about a lot of things that we've talked about today. Because once you finish a horror film, once the fear wears off, I don't know, maybe you just want to feel the adrenaline rush. But in some other ones, once it wears off, you're left with, new learnings and you find out things about yourself and things that you're scared of and ways that you can improve upon that to not be as scared the next time.
Yeah. So, I mean, what that makes me think of is really this episode, even though it's all about fear and how you can kind of invoke that in yourself and in the parks, watching movies, whatever it might be, it's almost even, it ties into that feeling of like accomplishment when you've encountered something that was scary or that you didn't think you could get through. And then now you have, and that adrenaline filled excitement kind of feeling that you feel now. I mean, that's the whole point of being scared in these situations.
I'm with you.
I mean, you want that after feeling. No one wants to be scared. At least I have to feel like no one wants to be scared. I don't want to be scared. You don't want to be scared.
Other people do, though.
Other people do. And no offense, but those people are crazy.
Like, we would never go to haunted houses.
Oh,
However,
God, no.
I don't know. If Stranger Things had a Halloween Horror Nights booth this year, we would have been first in line.
You would have been first in line.
But that's just because I love those characters.
Yeah. So I just feel like that's the ultimate goal here. Like if you're looking for a circle back around, like when we think about joy, right? If you're looking for joy in the parks, it's because maybe you had a bad day and you're looking for something to remedy that and kind of bring up that, happy feeling that you missed in your day because you had a bad day. If you're thinking about fear, you might ride a thrilling ride because you want that adrenaline rush or that like fear of I did it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add for this episode?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back on Wednesday for you podcast listeners for our storytelling of Na'vi River Journey. YouTube watchers, that will be out on Thursday for you. Like we said, we'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're having a lot of fun putting these videos together. It's a much different element. So if you're listening to us, hopefully it's still the same content, but it's a little bit different aspect. So we'll ease into it and we'll get it right. But we're having a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back with storytelling, like I said, for Na'vi River Journey. If you're looking to help us out in any way on podcast platforms, leaving us an iTunes review is absolutely the best way to spread the word about the podcast. So we appreciate you listening, and we will chat with you soon.